close your eyes and let the world around you soften, its sharp edges fading into a haze of calm. Tonight, I will take you on a journey, a gentle unraveling of time and place. This is the story of Kieran, a young man who once found magic in the small moments of life. Though he now lives amid the bustling streets of New York City, a city alive with its pulse and hum, his heart often drifts to a distant past, to a quiet village in Ireland, where the air was sweet with wildflowers and the woods hummed with secrets, to a haven high among the branches of an ancient oak tree, a place where childhood adventures unfolded like chapters in an enchanted tale. So settle in, let your mind travel far from where you are, and allow the lullaby of words to guide you. Let me tell you of Kieran's childhood, of laughter and melodies, and of the hidden magic that lingers in the quiet corners of the world. The world of Kieran's childhood had a certain weightless beauty, as though each day stretched out like a violin string, taut with possibility and resonant with melody. Born to the emerald embrace of rural Ireland, Kieran's days hummed with the earthy harmony of life in a countryside woven from mossy stones, mist-veiled fields, and the echoing caws of distant crows. His heart carried an ineffable tune, his spirit a quiet determination, and his hands, the hands of a violinist, danced as though destined to make music from the very air itself. Kieran's little village was nestled in a valley, cradled between rolling hills, where heather and bracken spilled over like a green tide. Hidden deep within this verdant expanse was a treehouse, their hidden special place. Not a treehouse of straight edges and measured angles, but one that grew organically from the embrace of a great oak, as though the two had conspired to create a refuge stitched together with wood, rope, and dreams. The treehouse, set high in the branches, was a place known only to Kieran and his two closest friends, Niamh and Mike. The three of them found the oak when they were younger, stumbling upon it during an aimless wander through the woods. With its gnarled, sprawling roots, it seemed as ancient as the earth, and its twisting branches cradled the sky. The bark had a rugged texture that would press into their palms as they climbed, leaving faint traces of the tree's resinous perfume on their skin. To Kieran, the oak was alive, its presence as warm and steadfast as the hum of a violin string beneath his fingers. Niamh, with her hair like autumn leaves, had an artist's eye, and she had painted the weathered walls of the treehouse with whimsical swirls of ochre and indigo. Mike, full of boundless energy and curiosity, had crafted pulley systems with which to hoist their provisions, stale biscuits, jam jars, and sometimes the odd treasure they unearthed from the woods. And Kieran, the dreamer, often sat in a corner of their hideout, turning the air electric with the soft, aching strains of his violin. The warm scent of wood mixed with the faint metallic tang of the violin strings as he played, filling the space with an almost tangible energy. What few ever knew, not even Niamh or Mike, was that Kieran's violin held a secret of its own. It was not an ordinary instrument. It seemed to carry the voice of the very earth itself. The wood of the violin, a deep mahogany, seemed to pulse faintly beneath his fingers, as though it held a memory of the tree it had come from. A tree as ancient and wise as the oak that cradled their treehouse. Whenever Kieran played, the violin sound was more than music. It was a kind of magic that stirred the unseen forces of the forest. It could awaken the whispering voices in the woods, summon glowing lights to dance among the leaves, and weave melodies that seemed to open windows into worlds beyond. Though Kieran did not fully understand its power, he often felt that the violin chose him as much as he had chosen it, sharing its secrets in the quiet, enchanted moments when only the woods were listening. On mornings cloaked in pearly fog, the trio would gather at the treehouse to watch the world emerge from its slumber. The branches swayed like sentinels against the dawn, their silhouettes etched against a sky washed in the muted pastels of sunrise. Beneath their feet, the damp bark of the wooden planks released the rich scent of the forest, a mingling of pine and earth and rain-soaked leaves. The cool mist kissed their cheeks and clung to their hair like droplets of spun glass. From above, the mist spread like a veil, hiding the expanse of fields below and making the treehouse feel as though it floated on the breath of clouds. The treehouse held many treasures, though none as valuable as the memories it bore witness to. Among its weathered planks and knotted ropes, Kieran, Niamh, and Mike discovered that magic often hid itself in the details, waiting patiently for curious eyes and open hearts to find it. Whether it was the golden slant of sunlight breaking through the canopy, or the quiet thrill of a hidden path, the world whispered its secrets to those who dared to listen. One late spring afternoon, the trio decided to explore a part of the woods they had never ventured into before. Their usual paths, beaten down by countless eager footsteps, gave way to a dense thicket of brambles and ivy. Armed with an old wooden walking stick Mike had found by the roadside, they carefully pushed through the tangled brush, their laughter mingling with the soft rustle of leaves. Beyond the thicket, they came upon an ancient stone archway, half buried in moss and crowned with wildflowers. It looked as though it had been there for centuries, forgotten by all but the forest itself. The air under the archway was cool, and the light seemed to shimmer as if it were passing through glass. Kieran ran his fingers along the weathered stones, feeling the rough texture under his fingertips. There were carvings on the stones, symbols and patterns that none of them could recognize. Though they said nothing, an unspoken understanding passed between the three friends. This was a place of old magic, a doorway to something beyond their comprehension. As they stepped through the archway, the atmosphere seemed to change. The air grew lighter, almost effervescent, and the woods beyond seemed bathed in an otherworldly glow. Birdsong filled the air, sweet and melodic, and the scent of honeysuckle hung heavy around them. Even the ground beneath their feet felt different, softer, as though the earth itself welcomed their presence. It was here, in this enchanted grove, that Kieran felt his violin come alive in his hands. Without thinking, he drew the bow across the strings, and the notes that emerged were unlike anything he had ever played before. The melody was light and whimsical, like a dance through moonlit meadows, and it seemed to call out to the very heart of the grove. To their astonishment, the grove responded. Tiny lights began to appear, flickering like fireflies, but brighter and steadier. They floated lazily through the air, swirling around the trio in patterns that felt deliberate as though they were part of a grand choreography. Niamh reached out a hand, and one of the lights hovered just above her palm, pulsating softly before darting away. The friends stayed in the grove until the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Though they eventually made their way back to the treehouse, they often returned to the grove in the weeks that followed, drawn by its unspoken promise of wonder. As the summer days stretched into weeks, the magic of their world seemed to grow stronger. One particularly warm evening, after the sun had dipped below the horizon, the three friends gathered at the edge of a sprawling meadow. The night was alive with the hum of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl, and the stars above were so numerous and bright that they seemed to spill across the sky like scattered diamonds. Kieran carried his violin, as he often did, and as the others settled onto the cool grass, he began to play. The music was soft and lilting, a lullaby for the night itself. As the notes drifted into the darkness, something extraordinary began to happen. The stars seemed to pulse in time with the music, their light growing brighter and dimmer in rhythm with Kieran's bow. A soft breeze stirred the grass, carrying the melody far beyond the meadow. And then, as if summoned by the song, a faint glow appeared on the horizon. It was not the glow of fire or lanterns, but something far more ethereal, soft and golden, like the first light of dawn. The glow grew closer, revealing itself to be a herd of deer. Their coats shimmered with an almost liquid radiance, and their movements were graceful and fluid, as though they were gliding rather than walking. The largest of the deer, a majestic stag with antlers that seemed to catch and hold the starlight, stepped forward, its luminous eyes fixed on Kieran. For a moment, the music faltered as Kieran stared back, his heart pounding. The stag lowered its head slightly, as if in acknowledgement, before turning and leading the herd away into the night. The friends watched in silence, their breaths caught in their throats, until the last traces of light had faded. That night, as they lay in the treehouse, wrapped in blankets and staring up at the stars through the open skylight, they spoke in hushed tones about what they had seen. Though they could not explain it, they felt certain that the stag had recognized Kieran's music, that it had been drawn to something deep and unspoken within him. The seasons continued to turn, and with each change came new discoveries and adventures. In autumn, the woods were alive with the crackle of falling leaves and the rich, earthy scent of damp soil. The treehouse seemed to blend even further into its surroundings, its wooden walls taking on the russet tones of the season. One crisp afternoon, they decided to follow a trail of glimmering stones that wound its way through the forest. The stones were unlike any they had seen before, their surfaces a deep, velvety purple that seemed to shimmer in the dappled sunlight. The trail led them to a clearing where a single tree stood, a silver birch, its bark gleaming like polished ivory. At the base of the tree was a small door, no taller than a book, carved into the trunk. It was intricately detailed, with tiny hinges and a delicate knob shaped like a flower. Though they knew better than to disturb it, they couldn't help but wonder who or what might live behind it. Kieran felt a familiar pull, the same tug of curiosity and wonder that had led them to the treehouse, the grove, and the glowing deer. He took out his violin and played a soft, tentative melody, as though introducing himself to the unseen inhabitants of the tree. Though nothing stirred, the air seemed to hum with quiet approval, as if the forest itself had acknowledged his offering. As winter approached, their visits to the treehouse became less frequent, the biting cold making their adventures shorter and more subdued. But the magic of the season was not lost on them. On one particularly frosty evening, as they trudged through the snow-laden woods, they came upon a sight that made them stop in their tracks. A frozen waterfall, its cascading water turned to crystal, glinted in the pale light of the full moon. The ice formed delicate patterns, like the veins of leaves, and the air around it seemed to sparkle with suspended frost. Kieran, unable to resist, took out his violin and began to play. The music echoed against the icy walls, and for a moment it felt as though the waterfall itself was alive, its frozen surface shimmering in response to the melody. The sight stayed with them long after the winter thawed, a memory etched into their hearts like the carvings on the ancient archway. By the time spring returned, bringing with it the heady scent of blooming flowers and the vibrant green of new growth, Kieran, Niamh, and Mike had come to realize that their childhood was a kind of magic in itself, fleeting and irreplaceable. Each adventure, each moment of wonder, was a thread in the tapestry of their lives, a melody that would linger long after the last note had been played. In the years between childhood and his life in New York, Kieran's connection to the magical landscape of his youth never truly faded. During his teenage years, the treehouse became more than just a childhood haven. It transformed into a place of profound personal discovery and musical awakening. As adolescence arrived, bringing with it the complexities of growing up, the treehouse remained their constant. The world around them might change, but this wooden haven suspended among the oak's branches stayed timeless. On summer evenings, when the light lingered like golden honey, and the air hummed with the soft drone of insects, Kieran would spend hours exploring the depths of his music. He discovered that his violin was more than an instrument. It was a conduit. Sometimes when the afternoon light filtered through the leaves just so, creating a cathedral of green and gold, the music would take on a life of its own. Notes would drift beyond mere melody, weaving stories that seemed to rise from the earth itself. The wood beneath his fingers would vibrate with a resonance that went beyond sound, telling tales of ancient forests, of spirits that danced between worlds, of memories older than human understanding. Niamh would sit nearby, her sketchbook open, capturing these moments in delicate watercolors that seemed to shimmer with an almost ethereal quality. Mike would listen, his usual restlessness replaced by a profound stillness, understanding that something extraordinary was happening. They were witnesses to a magic that defied explanation, a connection between music, memory, and the living landscape that surrounded them. During one particularly memorable autumn, as the trees prepared for their annual transformation, Kieran discovered something unusual about his relationship with music. It wasn't just that he played the violin. Sometimes it felt as though the violin played him. Melodies would emerge that he had never learned, rhythms that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the forest, The other musicians he would later encounter could never quite explain the unique quality of his sound, a depth, a resonance that spoke of something beyond technical skill. His music began to attract attention, not just from people, but from the world around him. Birds would pause mid-flight to listen, their wings suspended in mid-air. Deer would emerge from the forest's edge, their luminous eyes fixed on him with an almost human understanding. Even the wind seemed to carry his music differently, threading the notes through the branches like a living thing. The treehouse bore witness to these moments of transformation. Its weathered planks, painted with Niamh's swirling designs, absorbed these musical revelations. The ropes Mike had so carefully knotted, the pulley systems he had engineered, became more than mere childhood constructions. They were threads connecting a world of wonder to the realm of human experience. As Kieran's musical talents grew, so did the mystery of his violin. Local musicians would marvel at its tone, at the way it seemed to sing with a voice that was both ancient and immediate. Some of the older residents of the village would whisper that such an instrument came along only once in generations, a violin that was more than wood and strings, but a living memory of the landscape itself. These were the years that shaped Kieran, that transformed him from a child playing in a treehouse to a musician who carried within him the magic of his homeland. Each note he would later play in concert halls around the world carried the essence of those summers, of that oak tree, of the enchanted grove where light danced between the leaves. And music was more than just sound. It was a language of connection, of memory, of the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary. Years would pass, and though life would take them in different directions, the treehouse and its enchanted woods would remain with them. For Kieran, the memories became the heart of his music, each note a tribute to the magic of his youth. And though he now lived in a city of steel and glass, his heart would always belong to the rolling hills and secret woods of Ireland, a place where the extraordinary hid in the folds of the ordinary, waiting to be discovered. It was during one such morning that Kieran discovered the magic of their treehouse was not confined to its wooden walls. As he closed his eyes and let the bough kiss the strings of his violin, the music seemed to echo into the hollows of the world. The notes, warm and luminous, threaded through the mist, drawing forth a hidden orchestra of sound. The distant ripple of a stream became a harp, the whisper of leaves, a chorus of strings, the soft calls of wood pigeons, flutes in an unseen symphony. Niamh and Mike were stilled, captivated by the harmony that enveloped them, as though the forest itself were singing back to Kieran. The air seemed to shimmer with the resonance of the notes, like sunlight breaking through shadow. Their adventures through the Irish countryside often felt like chapters from an old fairy tale. One afternoon, the three friends followed a gentle stream that wound through the woods, its waters glistening like spun silver beneath dappled sunlight. The air was heady with the sweetness of wildflowers, and the soft crunch of pebbles underfoot accompanied their every step. The burbling melody of the stream harmonized with the creak of branches in the wind, creating a symphony unique to the woods. The stream led them to a meadow bordered by hawthorn trees, heavy with fragrant blossoms. The air was laced with the sharp sweetness of hawthorn and the wild tang of damp grass. In the center of the meadow, lay a curious ring of mushrooms, their caps speckled with dew like tiny lanterns. Niamh tilted her head, her amber eyes alight with intrigue, while Mike reached out to touch one, his fingers brushing its soft surface. Kieran, feeling the quiet pulse of the place, set his violin to his shoulder and let its voice spill into the air. As he played, sunlight poured like molten gold over the meadow, and the shadows of the hawthorn trees stretched their arms as if to listen. Time seemed to slow, the notes of Kieran's melody curling like smoke and settling into the soil. Though none of them spoke a word, they felt an almost sacred stillness in the air, as though they had stumbled upon the heart of something older than memory itself. The rustle of leaves and the sighs of the distant wind became part of the music, wrapping around them in an invisible embrace. The seasons marked their days like verses in a song. Summer draped the treehouse in swaying curtains of green, while autumn gilded its timbers with the glow of fiery leaves. Winter muffled the woods in snow and frost, and their sanctuary became a warm cocoon where the three huddled together, their breath forming ghostly plumes in the freezing air. And then there was spring. Spring brought a kind of effervescent rebirth to the countryside. The air fizzed with the scent of blooming lilacs and fresh rain, and the forests pulsed with the rhythm of sap rising through ancient veins. One bright morning, the trio ventured to a secluded grove, where Niamh had heard rumors of bluebells carpeting the forest floor. When they arrived, the sight that met their eyes seemed almost otherworldly. The bluebells, bathed in soft sunlight, stretched endlessly in every direction, their nodding heads a sea of indigo waves. The air was thick with their delicate perfume, and even Mike, who was usually brimming with boundless energy, was rendered silent by the spectacle. Kieran's violin accompanied their journey as they wove through the flowers. The music seemed to conjure stories of fairies and forest spirits, of forgotten kings and hidden treasures. And though their treehouse awaited them just beyond the woods, for a moment the grove felt like the end of the world, a place suspended in time and dream. Years would pass, and Kieran's life would take him far from the rolling hills and secret woods of his childhood. His violin carried him to concert halls and bustling cities, and his music became a bridge between worlds. Yet no matter how many ovations he received, or how far he traveled, Kieran often found his thoughts drifting back to that old oak tree and the sanctuary it held in its arms. He could still feel the grain of the wooden planks beneath his fingers, still smell the tang of rain-soaked leaves and moss. In the quiet hours, when the applause faded and the world seemed too vast and too loud, he would close his eyes and play. And in the echoes of his violin, he would hear the whispers of the forest, the laughter of his friends, and the lullabies of a time when the world was small and infinite all at once. The treehouse lived on, not just in the woods of his childhood, but in the notes he drew from his violin, an endless melody that spoke of magic, friendship, and the eternal rhythm of the earth. Years after Kieran had left the rolling hills of Ireland for the bustling streets of New York, he wandered into a small violin repair shop on a quiet street. The shop seemed to call to him, its window crowded with instruments in various states of care. The air inside was thick with the mingling scents of varnish and aged wood, and faint traces of melody seemed to linger, like the echoes of performances long past. As his violin was examined on the counter, the luthier's hands, practiced and precise, traced the contours of its body. There was something in the wood that seemed to hold his attention longer than expected, a subtle texture or resonance that carried an air of mystery. Beneath layers of time and polish lay a history, an origin that whispered of its maker's artistry. The violin held secrets in its grain, secrets that Kieran had never fully understood. As he ran his fingers along the familiar curve later that evening, the luthier's words echoed in his mind. Irish oak, sacred wood. The idea brought a wave of memories rushing back. The ancient oak tree that had held their childhood sanctuary, its roots deep and gnarled, its branches wide enough to cradle the sky. Could it be that his violin had been crafted from that very tree? The thought was intoxicating, as though the years between then and now had folded in on themselves, creating a bridge where time and place could meet. The violin seemed to hum faintly beneath his touch, its surface warm and alive, as if it remembered the tree's embrace. Kieran raised the bow and began to play. The music spilled into the room, soft and searching, and as the notes curled into the air, it felt as though the violin itself carried the soul of the oak. The melodies were not just music, but memories of laughter drifting through the treehouse walls, of whispered voices carried by the wind, of the glowing lights that danced in the enchanted grove. The violin had always been more than an instrument. It was a vessel, holding within its strings the spirit of his childhood sanctuary. Each note seemed to awaken the essence of the tree, a quiet strength and timeless wisdom woven into the wood. And as Kieran played, the apartment around him faded away, replaced by the vivid greenery of his youth, the rustle of leaves, the scent of moss and rain-soaked earth, and the golden light filtering through the canopy. He was back in the treehouse, back in the heart of the magic that had shaped him. When the final note lingered and the room fell silent, Kieran lowered the bow, his breath steady and calm. He felt a quiet certainty settle over him. The magic of his childhood, the sanctuary of the oak, and the secrets of his violin were all part of something greater, an endless melody that spoke of connection, wonder, and the enduring rhythm of the earth. Sweet dreams. Good night.